6 seconds. That was how long Senator Daniel Ashford had before a stranger's hand would have closed around his elbow and steered him through a side door that led. Security would later confirm. 2. An underground parking structure with no cameras and 3 possible exits onto a public street. 6 seconds stood between a routine afternoon and a story that would have ended very differently. And the only thing standing between those 6 seconds and disaster was an 8-year-old girl who had never met the senator before, tugging on his sleeve at a crowded fundraiser to whisper for words that made his blood go cold. Your bodyguard isn't real. Nobody in that ballroom had any reason to expect danger. The event was a routine campaign fundraiser at the Whitmore Hotel. 300 guests. A 5-person security detail that had worked with Senator Ashford for the better part of 2 years. And a room full of donors more concerned with the quality of the shrimp than with anything resembling a threat. Daniel Ashford had done 1,000 events like this one. He had a rhythm for them. Handshake. Brief exchange, photo, move on. And he had been moving through that rhythm. For nearly 40 minutes, when a girl in a purple dress broke from her mother's side near the desert table and walked directly toward him with the kind of unhurried purpose most children don't have around adults they've never met. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness has no rank and grace wears no uniform, please like this video, subscribe to Kindness Tales, and share this with someone who needs to believe in people again today. Her name was Maren Doyle, and she was 8 years old. And she knew more about the specific weight and shape of a police badge than most adults would ever need to know, because her father, Officer Thomas Doyle, had spent 11 years walking a beat before he was killed responding to a domestic disturbance call 14 months earlier. On a Tuesday in March, that Maren's mother, Elise, still could not talk about without her voice going thin. Thomas had been the kind of father who brought his work home in small, careful pieces. Not the danger, never the danger, but the details. The parts that fascinated a curious kid. He'd shown Maren his badge more times than she could count. Let her hold it, weighed it in her palm, and told her what real ones felt like. Explained the tiny design elements that counterfeits almost always got wrong, the exact shade of gold, the particular texture of the enamel, the precise placement of a state seal that took factories specializing in the real thing to get exactly right. It had been a game between them, something to do on slow evenings. And Maren had absorbed all of it the way children absorb anything shared with them by a parent they adore. Without knowing that 14 months later, in a hotel ballroom 300 miles from where her father used to walk his beat, that game would matter more than anyone could have imagined. Elise had brought Maren to the fundraiser because her sister worked event coordination for the hotel and had gotten them in as guests. A small treat during a year that had offered the family very few of them. Maren had been standing near the desert table, mostly bored, when she noticed one of the men in dark suits standing near the senator, not doing anything unusual, not moving strangely. Just standing the way security details stand, alert and still. But something about the badge clipped to his jacket had snagged in her. Memory the way a wrong note snags in the ear of someone who spent enough time around music to know when something's off. She didn't understand in that first moment what exactly was wrong. She only understood that it was wrong, the same instinctive, wordless certainty a child has, but a stranger's smile that doesn't quite reach their eyes. She watched him for almost 2 full minutes before she moved, working through it the careful way her father had taught her to work through things without saying so. And by the time she crossed the room toward Senator Ashford, she had narrowed it down to the detail that would matter most. The badge on the man's jacket had the wrong seal. Not obviously wrong. Wrong in the specific, easy-to-miss way her father had warned her counterfeits usually were, a seal slightly too smooth, missing the fine engraved texture that real state security credentials carried. The kind of difference that would mean nothing to almost anyone in that ballroom and everything to a girl who had spent hours of her childhood turning a real one over in her small hands. She reached the senator's side just as his security team was beginning to reposition him toward a side exit. Guided by the man with the wrong badge, who had introduced himself earlier that afternoon to the event coordinator as a last-minute addition sent by the state's executive protection unit, paperwork that, as it would later turn out, existed nowhere in any actual state database. Inserted into the day's credentialing through a gap in verification that the real security team, trusting and rushed, hadn't caught, Marin tugged the senator's sleeve. He looked down, the particular reflexive patience adults extend to children at events like this one already forming on his face, ready to offer a quick smile and move on. She said quietly, urgently, in a voice pitched only for him, "Your bodyguard isn't real." Daniel Ashford's first instinct, the one that almost cost him the 6 seconds that mattered most, was to smile and say something kind and keep moving. The way 18 years in public life had trained him to handle every small, well-meaning interruption from a stranger's child. He said gently, "Which one, sweetheart?" Marone pointed carefully at the man now standing closest to the senator's right side, already extending an arm to guide him toward the door. She said, "His badge is wrong. The seal's too smooth. My dad was a police officer. He showed me real ones. That one's fake." Something in the specificity of it, not "he seems scary" or "I don't like him," but a precise, technical detail delivered with the flat certainty of a child repeating something she'd been taught rather than something she'd imagined, made Daniel Ashford's steps slow. Just slightly. Just enough. He had spent 2 decades in rooms full of people trying to get his attention for 100 different reasons. And he had developed, without ever fully articulating it to himself, an instinct for the difference between performance and fact. This did not sound like performance. He did not stop walking abruptly, which security experts would later say was exactly the right call, since any sudden movement risked alerting the man beside him that something had shifted. Instead, he turned slightly toward his actual detail lead, a veteran agent named Priya Chandrasekaran who had run his protection for 6 years, and said, low and even, "Get eyes on the badge of the man to my right." Now, quietly. Priya, trained for exactly this kind of subtle, urgent redirection, did not hesitate or ask why. She moved half a step closer, glanced at the credential clipped to the stranger's jacket, and felt her own instincts sharpen instantly. The seal was wrong, subtly but unmistakably. Once she was looking for it specifically instead of glancing past it in the general flow of a crowded room, she caught the eye of a second agent across the ballroom and gave a signal the team had rehearsed 100 times, but never once needed to use outside of training. The next 90 seconds happened fast and quietly, the way well-trained security teams try to make everything happen. No shouting, no scene. No panic rippling through 300 donors still discussing shrimp and campaign donations. 2 agents closed in on either side of the imposter, one placing a firm hand on his shoulder under the pretense of a routine credential check, the other quietly guiding Senator Ashford in the opposite direction, back into the crowd. Away from the side door, the fake agent had been steering him toward for the better part of 10 minutes. The man did not go. Quietly, once he understood he'd been caught, he attempted to break away, was subdued by hotel security and Ashford's team together, and was later found, once police searched what he was carrying, to have a set of restraints and a syringe and an inner jacket pocket evidence. Investigators would determine over the following weeks of a kidnapping for ransom plot targeting the senator that had been in planning for nearly 2 months, orchestrated by a group connected to a business dispute involving one of Ashford's committee votes. The credentialing gap that had led him into the event was traced to a temp staffing agency whose vetting process, it turned out, had been compromised weeks earlier without anyone at the hotel or the campaign realizing it. Daniel Ashford did not fully understand, in the immediate chaotic minutes after the man was subdued, how close he had come to walking through that side door. It was only later, debriefed by Priya and by the police detectives who arrived within the hour, hearing the words restraints and syringe and kidnapping plot laid out in a flat professional tone that made the danger real in a way the ballroom's calm surface had disguised, that the full shape of what had almost happened settled into him, not as adrenaline, which had already come and gone, but as a slow, delayed kind of dread that arrived once the danger was already over. He found Marin 20 minutes later, sitting with her mother in a side room where hotel staff had gathered the guests closest to the incident to give statements. Still in her purple dress, swinging her feet slightly against a chair too tall for her, looking less shaken than the adults around her, Daniel knelt down in front of her, an act that surprised his own security detail more than it surprised Marin, and said, "You saved my life today. Do you understand that?" Marin considered this with the careful seriousness of a child weighing a fact against her own sense of what was ordinary. She said, "My dad taught me about badges. I just told you what I saw." Elise Doyle, sitting beside her daughter with her hands pressed together tightly in her lap, said quietly, her father was a police officer. He was killed in the line of duty 14 months ago. Her voice caught. She still remembers everything he taught her. I didn't know how much until today. Daniel Ashford was quiet for a long moment, looking at this girl who had noticed what an entire trained security detail had missed, because her father, in the last months of his life, had spent quiet evenings teaching his daughter to see details that most adults never learn to look for at all. He said, "Your father sounds like he was a very good teacher," Rand said. "He was the best police officer. Everyone said so at his funeral," Daniel said. "I believe them." In the weeks that followed, once the investigation had run its course and the men behind the plot had been arrested, Daniel Ashford did not do what a less thoughtful person might have done, which was turn Marin's courage into a press conference, a photo opportunity, a talking point for a campaign that could certainly have used one. He asked Elise privately what would actually help her family, not as compensation, not as a transaction for her daughter's alertness, but as the kind of concrete support that could make the year ahead and the years after it meaningfully easier for a widow raising a child. Alone on a police survivor's benefits that had never quite stretched far enough, he established quietly and without his name attached to any headline about it, a fund in Officer Thomas Doyle's name that covered Marin's education from that point through college, and funded a training initiative inside the state's police credentialing office specifically, designed to close the exact kind of verification gap that had let a counterfeit badge into that ballroom in the first place, a program he insisted on naming after the officer whose daughter had caught what the professionals missed, rather than after himself. On the day the fund was formally established, Daniel visited the Doyle family's apartment, sitting at their kitchen table with a cup of coffee he didn't finish, and told Marin plainly, "I want you to know that the reason you're getting to keep learning, keep growing up safe, isn't charity. It's because what you did mattered more than almost anything anyone did for me that whole year. And I don't want you to ever wonder whether it was worth it." Marin, who had spent 14 months missing a father whose lessons had, in the end, reached far beyond their own kitchen table, looked at the senator for a long moment and said, "My dad would have liked that you said thank you properly. He always said that mattered more than anything." If this story moved you, please like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to Kindness Tales for more stories of courage, grace, and the small human moments that change everything. And tell us in the comments, has a child's honesty or a stranger's small act of attention ever protected you in a moment you didn't expect?